To this webinar today. My name is Bill Baker with Firestorm. We're pleased to have you joining us for this webinar that is sponsored by the Rochester Business Alliance. Today we're going to be discussing workplace violence prevention actually, which is more important than workplace violence itself. We invite you to become
Bill,
our
you got a
friend.
little Freudian slip there, I think.
Become our friend at Facebook. Firestorm Solutions is our Facebook name, and our Twitter account is Firestorm Soul. There is a hashtag. That hashtag is Crisis Coach. Firestorm transforms crisis into value and empowers you to manage risk and crises. Firestorm has expertise in crisis management, critical decision support, crisis communication, crisis public relations, and consequence management. Please keep in mind, though, that the presentation today is not complete without the accompanying oral comments and discussion, and the work product must be reviewed and considered in conjunction with your organization's personal counsel. In addition, do not interpret our advice and comments as legal advice or legal opinion. The Rochester Business Alliance and the Eastern Great Lakes Association of Contingency Planners and Firestorm are presenting the Crisis Coach webinar series. Today is the third part of this particular grouping where we're discussing workplace violence prevention and an overarching approach to protect your company. Jim Satterfield, president of Firestorm, is going to be the presenter today, and we're pleased to have Chip Dawson, who is the head of Rochester Business Alliance. Chip, over to you, please.
Thank you, Bill. And let me correct one thing. I'm not the head of the Rochester Business Alliance. I coordinate health and safety for them. So in fact, we have a new head at the Rochester Business Alliance, Bob Duffy, who is the immediate past assistant or lieutenant governor for the state of New York. So we're delighted to have Bob with the RBA.
That's impressive, Chip.
It is. It's quite impressive. So let me get into some things that I wanted to say. And first of all, it's good morning to all of our listeners. Spring is in the air finally, and I'm delighted to welcome you to the third in the 2015 series of the Crisis Coach. The Rochester Business Alliance is pleased to continue our partnership with both Firestorm and our friends at the Eastern Great Lakes Association of Contingency Planners to bring you, our members, this important 45-minute discussion by Jim Satterfield, who, as I know, is one of the country's top crisis managers, covering the last in the 3 sessions on building an intelligence network. And today's session, as Bill said, covers an overarching approach to protecting employees. I make a point to follow the news on workplace safety because it's part of my job in all its forms. And a couple of weeks ago, I hit upon an online report in the Legal Intelligencer that contained the outcome of a trial where the families of 2 craft workers gunned down by a disgruntled employee sued the craft security contractor and won an award in Philadelphia court for $8 million. The shooter had been suspended, but then walked to her car in the parking lot, retrieved a .357 Magnum revolver, and re-entered the plant without challenge and killed her 2 co-workers. Many things were done wrong here, but the key issue was the failure of anyone in authority to anticipate violence and take effective steps to defuse the situation well before the gun was retrieved. Well, it's too late for the craft workers, but what Jim has to share with you today can save the people in your organization if you implement your customized protection and prevention plan. I have a personal one. I call it ADD, and it's not the psychological version of ADD. It's anticipate, de-escalate, and diffuse. And I think if you keep words like that and the words that Jim's going to share with us in mind, it's going to help you to make sure that you don't have an incident like this occur in your workplace. Now here's Jim.
Well, Chip, thanks. I always appreciate your insights. It's one of the things I enjoy about doing this series together. You put everything, I think, in an excellent perspective for us all to think about. And obviously the mental picture that you drew with the craft workers and the impact on those families and the lives of everyone that it touched, it's an overwhelming one to consider. there are 2 million episodes of workplace violence annually in the United States, and that's a number that's just is staggering to the imagination. But we can't turn on the television set or pick up a newspaper today without seeing those evidences of violence around us as we carry forward. So it's good to be speaking with you again and with the folks in Western New York. This survey was recently done of 400 businesses, and you looked at them. 58% said that they their plans were a work in progress, and only 18% responding that they were completely prepared. 44% weren't sure that they had plans even, and 38% responded that they needed help in the area, and 55% said they needed guidance with crisis management tools and planning. The little pie chart over to the right is an interesting one we did with a group out of New Jersey where we surveyed manufacturers there and asked the question, do you feel confident that your organization is prepared to respond to an incident of violence? And in that diagram, 33% said yes, 28% said no, and 39% said I don't know. And obviously if you don't know, you're not prepared and not ready. So this is an ongoing concern and an issue with all of us in our organizations, and a general theme in all of these is if you're explaining, you're losing. And no one wants to have to pick up the phone and call a family and say your husband or wife or son or daughter or mother or father aren't coming home from work today. And that's a call that we all want to avoid at all costs. So our goal here is really to be prepared, not unprepared. And there's certainly challenges in establishing how we assess risk and the communications that we need to make. And I want to share with you a quick story here, as Chip had done. But this is about a gentleman who was working in a distribution center in a large public company. And he made 80 postings in one 8-hour shift. So a question would be, does he have enough to do? But you'll start to look at the tone of these, and you would see that there's potentially a behavior of concern here. And the headline on this is now or never. To intervene now, before there's an escalation in this behavior into actions or threats or violence, is an important one, as Chip talked about the individual who went back out to the car to get the gun. If you continue to look at the postings through the day with postings on Facebook and out on Twitter and sharing it with hundreds of his own personal contacts and sharing this information, even going so far as to post pictures about this as he continued to see an escalation. We had set up a geofence around the warehouse area, and we'll talk a little bit more about that as we continue on today. And we're able to look at the postings that are coming out of that particular plant location, that distribution center. And that's how we were able to see this. And in fact, we were able to track where he was within any portion of the distribution center as he was making those postings. And as you continued on, he even had a posting up that he the only way to resolve this was to bring a gun to work tomorrow, and he was going to settle it. So when you think about that, and you think about the types of things that are being said, all that information is out there, and we need to understand it and act before that gun comes into the building and into the area. Can you identify your organization's next crisis? We can, but more importantly, you need to be able to say that you can. We've been talking about in the webinar series about putting together intelligence networks, and the goal here is to get predictive, actionable intelligence. Background checks, anonymous reporting, behavioral risk threat assessment, the social media monitoring are all key tools in creating that type of an intelligence network. We talked about the anonymous reporting earlier this year, as well as the behavioral risk assessment. We'll hit a little bit of that today, but we really want to spend some time on thinking about what you're not doing, and that's looking at what's being said about your company that you could easily know as the person who posted it. Background checks are one of the elements, just to touch base on. if you have any business that deals with children, the best practices are that you have to do annual background checks. That still works also for businesses. If you can, it's a great way to keep up with what is going on with your employee base. If you're doing a federal felony background search, that's always good. It'd be nice to know that the person had been convicted of a felony. But if they had been arrested on a felony charge and plea bargained it down to a misdemeanor, they will not appear in a federal felony database search. So if you knew that the person had been arrested for a fairly significant exposure, a felony, but it was later plea bargained down to a misdemeanor, wouldn't you still want to know that within your organization? To look at misdemeanors, you have to look at that at a county level. And the good news is that background searches done with that inclusion are not much more expensive than the ones that are just the federal database. I would encourage you to do that, and where you can within your company, do this on an annual basis. If you had an employee who had a substance abuse problem, they were arrested for drunk driving or drugs, that's clearly something you'd like to know because of the impact on it. Now, almost every incident of workplace violence has warning signs and indicators, and we're going to be talking about it and focusing around trying to intervene before that gun enters the workplace. And as we talked about earlier this year, the behavioral risk threat assessment is an opportunity for you to do that. And if it's a low type of a problem you're having with an employee, your normal discipline structure will handle that directly. If it's an act of violence, if that gun is already coming into the workplace or there's a specific targeted threat, I'm going to do this to you tomorrow, and it's directed obviously at an individual, that's when you pick up the phone and call 911. But there's a big gray area right in the middle, and that's where those behaviors of concern really are one that you have to have a formal system on how you evaluate it. We choose to divide that into 3 levels: guarded, elevated, and severe. And you take different actions depending upon how you deem those individuals to fall. But having a plan in place so that you do the same thing every time as you're evaluating those behaviors makes a difference. ASIS has the thermometer type of a rating system, going from behaviors of concern to threatening behaviors to physical injury and death. Clearly, all of our goals on the call today is to focus around that behavior of concern before it rises to that next level up. So as we think about it, you have to have a framework to be able to do that. Some policies, some procedures, people assigned to it to accomplish this task and program. This is probably a function of either various departments within your organizations or individuals, somebody from HR, someone from security or operations. Generally, putting together a team of 3 people is a good working number, but the team should be less than 5, so that you have the trained individuals who are helping you make those decisions. The screening is that critical element in that middle area of behavior of concern, and whether it's in a school environment or a business environment, you would interview the person that there was a problem with, people that they work with, their supervisor, people in the work group. What kinds of experiences have you had? And if you deem this person to be at that severe level or even elevated, you want to put an action plan in place of how you're going to monitor that employee and over a period of time to see how they're coming together. And in some cases, we would have to refer them out for help outside of the organization. And then keeping all the information in a file, a central repository or a vortex so that you can manage through it. The guarded and elevated and severe that we talked about, you'll see as you have opined and come to identify them at a specific level, you still have to do some supervision over them or intervention. You'll see as it moves to elevated, we do enhanced supervision and intervention to carry directly through that. But that severe level, those that are just before the violent acts, we need to remove them from the workplace. It could be a suspension or a termination. If your intention is to allow them to come back, you want to have a written action plan and have defined requirements before their return to the workforce, because those are issues that are clearly involved. This investigative methodology, having your individual teams trained, and we don't care what screening tools you use. There are a bunch that are out there that are listed, In fact, the Secret Service and FBI have protocols that are free and directly available to you to carry forward. But you need to document how you're going to have your behavioral assessment team convene, what are they going to do, and how they implement those programs. The action plan must be continually reviewed and updated to make sure that this person no longer poses a danger to themselves or others. And you've got to share that within the organization to those that are in a position that would need to know. And depending upon the size of your company, would determine exactly how broad that sharing would become. So when you think about it, it's creating an awareness so that all employees recognize behaviors of concern, but you've got to have that, as we've talked about in earlier webinars, the ability to have them feel that they can report it and share that information, that they'd have the opportunity to do it without threat of any retaliation that would come together. Since people see different portions of this from different aspects of their job, you want to have a central repository so that information comes in and doesn't become lost. And then finally, the plan: investigation, screening, action plan, monitoring, sign off, and keeping the records as we go forward. Now, training people to be aware, you'll see just listed here a lot of the characteristics that you could think about. And we'd shared some of these with you in the past as you would go forward. But clearly, if you start to see that escalation into the warning signs, it becomes much more imminent, and that's a point when we would intervene. Suicide threats are a particular concern, and regularly we see those individuals who are contemplating suicide having kill lists, that they want to even the score with those who have put them in this position. And that is not an uncommon circumstance, and so while we're concerned for the individual here, we're also concerned for the fellow employees that would come together. Now, Chip talked about ADD with his awareness approach, and I think that's a good one to at least build a base to look at that. Firestorm follows a predict, plan, perform process, so not dissimilar from what Chip described. As you think about it, we need to predict what the vulnerabilities and threats are, what are their impacts, how do we monitor and triggers. And as we think about violence, this is particularly true, that we need to make sure that everyone is aware of that, and we're using all the tools. And we'll talk about the monitoring and the intelligence side in just a moment. The plans are, what are you going to do? And whether it's the behavioral risk assessment or having security programs in place for your organization, those would also be elements to be concerned about. And then finally, performing, training, doing test exercises, making sure you have a crisis management structure in place to deal with it, or the proper supplies as we focus. So in creating an intelligence network, there are two things you have to do. You have to listen and look, and we're going to hit this theme a couple of times in the remaining time in our webinars today. And listening is creating that general situational awareness. We'll be looking on social media at streams, at phrases, and at words, and we're looking for something here that causes a tripwire to go, you know, that doesn't seem quite right. When we hear that, then we shift over and then start to look at that particular person of interest, a specific location or an event, the sphere of influence that that person might have, who else are they talking to, and so it becomes a very targeted awareness of where we are going. And that leads us in to try to put all of this stuff that's going on social media in some perspective for you. First, social media is not random. It's targeted. It's very specific. When someone's making a posting there, they're talking about a particular company, a particular event, a particular person associated with it. What we want to be able to do with the intelligence network is to identify the target in this chaotic universe of conversation that's going on, to empower your decision making to be able to deal with it. Look at the posting there. Next time you decide to do lines of cocaine in the office, you should be a little more discreet. Doing it in front of me is a bit obvious. Plus, it was like 2 a.m. when you were engaging in illegal activity while inside the company's office. And if you go on with that type of a listing, if that was happening at your company, wouldn't you in fact want to know? People know what's going on, and when they know, they talk, but today they talk on social media. here's a shootout to a guy that's going to work drunk. And if you look at that and look at the area of him running the red light and carrying forward at this point, if this is your employee who's arriving at work today drunk, would make a big difference. So as we focus on this today, words matter, intent matters. Say one more thing about my brother and I'm going to kill you. Well, this was posting from a high school talking about another student there. We see people who can't anger issues every day within our companies and our organizations. How are we going to deal with them? What are we going to do? But we've got to recognize it. But if you had this type of a threat going on within your company, you could know that information. This puts you in a position to talk to the person who made the threat, the person who is directed toward, to diffuse that situation before someone needs to go out to the car and get a gun and come back in to the location. So conversation is a very complex one. It involves the semantics of speech, syntax, context, and idiom. And you can see that some of the words that were used, and again, I apologize about all the language that you see that are reported out there. There's information that's there. And sometimes we have to look at what are other words for drugs, what are the other words for a gun, because those would then give us an indication that something's going on. We're doing monitoring for an account, and they had workers up on their roof working on the HVAC system, and they were posting pictures of them drinking beer while they were working. Well, if you've got people working on your roof, I think you'd like to know that you were, having beer served liberally on the roof of your building. Another that will meet you in the restroom to get our product. Well, I don't know about you. I normally don't go to a restroom for product, but that's another indication of a drug transaction. And we find repeatedly information is posted, but you have to know what to look for to understand what the intent by those messages are. So as we carry this forward, we listen to these patterns of conversation, and we do it in a structured, investigative manner where and as they occur. The where means if they're talking on Twitter, or if they're posting a picture on Instagram, or insert name of whatever social media platform that you want to think about du jour, you need to know about that. There was a posting just 2 weeks ago about an employee who took a job with a company and was not happy that she was taking the job with the company, and she really didn't want to work there and thought this was a bad organization all around. And the HR director then sends her back a note, you don't need to worry about coming in. That information is out there. Stopping that employee before you've hired them, put them through training program, and maybe turn down another employee for that position that would have made a difference, there's a direct operational impact. So as we think about these things, it's not just physical security that we're concerned about. It's your operations, it's your brand, it's your reputation. All of those things are coming in. At StubHub here, if you look at that, here's an employee who wasn't particularly happy about what was going on within the company. This is a particular issue that you would want to address from that perspective. We had a posting from another where a security guard was saying, well, I'm not going to trust shoplifters anymore because this company doesn't care about that, and I'm not risking my life, and goes on with a long rant. He posted it under an artificial name, but he also posted it to his Facebook account with his picture. And when we shared the picture with the client, they were able to go directly to the employee and address it. But many things can be seen on the internet, and it's not just the words, it's looking to see what the impact are. Here we have a fast food worker who is hitting a blunt, taking a hit off a marijuana cigarette, and you don't know tomorrow what's going. You don't have until tomorrow to see what's happening within your organization, because it's happening today already. There's an opportunity that you could carry forward, and if you carry it even a little bit further, you can see that this was a McDonald's that was happening. This was your company and your business. Is this the image that you want to have out on the internet? Because it's already in your organization now. These types of things are there. and that information is being posted, and if you don't know about it, you're not looking. And that's really what we wanted to try to share today, is to have you look and understand that. We also need to understand those behaviors of concern. Once we identify it, there are actions that have to be taken, and you start to look at what these words are. Remember, words matter, intents matter. And if you see these postings, again, these are out of a school, I would kill her, let's go ahead and do it. I mean, if you look at that, that clearly would be an indication that you've got predictive, actionable intelligence now that needs to be addressed within your organization. There are people talking about your employees. There are people talking about your company today on the internet. If you're not listening and looking, you're going to miss those conversations as they carry forward. And when you look at what you would normally do is turn and have a conversation with someone, today people are posting that information on social media, and it's not password protected. We're not talking about hacking. We're talking about having that information that's out there for the public to see. Here's another series that was done around a school, and we blacked out where it was so that we wouldn't share that information out. But if you look at the stream here, who is on the list, who's going to be hit, these types of comments are severe, and then we become surprised that a gun comes to school and there's a loss associated with it. So as we think about it, we then need to look at what's going on. Listening is the general situational awareness. Look is the targeted, where we're looking at a person of interest, a specific threat, or an issue that would come together. Now, here's a location, and when we were sharing earlier and looking at it, where we blocked it out in the center, that's a specific location. So in this example, we put a geo fence up, that's that circle that you see around it, and we can make it large or small to track what's being said about this company there. That's looking at a particular situation. When we do a listening, we're looking at a broader area, but we physically are looking where this person is and who they're interacting with and tracking and monitoring it. Now, it's not just about violence. It's about brand and reputation, too. There was a change at J.P. Morgan, and there was a new employee coming in, and they said, well, let's just have people ask questions and learn more about Jimmy Lee, who is the new employee there, and starting to post. You look at this, immediately someone says, at what number of billions of dollars in fines will it no longer be profitable to run your criminal enterprise? What's it like working with the Mexican drug cartel? Do they tip? And then finally, after a few hours of this being up, tomorrow's Q&A is canceled, you think. Bad idea, back to the drawing board. People are aware of what's going on, and there is an issue that will start to come together. So in every respect, people are listening. People are listening to what's going on, and there's an expectation that you're providing a safe workplace. There's an expectation that you have all of these elements under control within your organization. Now, you're concerned about your particular location, and you're concerned about access and security as you think about it. Maybe there's a fence around your building. Maybe you have a security system. You have a card system to enter your building, or at least a key to be able to come in. So you're trying to control and create as safe an environment as you can. You may have even put up video cameras to track the access into the building or what's going on in and around your property and location. Well, all of those same threats and risks are going on today and being discussed, but they're being discussed on social media. If you are out there, there's an expectation that you are listening and looking at that. Now, it doesn't really matter what the platform is that those things are posted on, but there's that flow of information that's out there, and it's where people go to find out about your organization. Could this affect your ability to hire future employees? Maybe they learn immediately from the internet Yours is not a good place to work. Maybe it's not a safe place to work. Your clients could learn that, wait a minute, there's a problem here. There's a morale issue. I'm not going to get quality of service if these types of issues are going on and looking out within that direction. We're in an environment today where the world has changed, and there's an expectation that you know what's going on within your organization. And in fact, particular verticals have already had federal regulators requiring that there be a social media risk program in place. Well, if you're in the banking or finance industries, that's already there. And in fact, those standards have now been adopted as best practices in other marketing segments. If you're explaining why you let the person come back to work with a gun when that information would have been posted out there, then those fines that Chip talked about at the very beginning are not unlikely. They're fairly likely to occur. So we want to think about this as we think about who we are and what we're doing. Workplace violence isn't the equivalent of thinking about the fire protection that we learned as children, stop, drop, and roll. Workplace violence prevention starts in understanding, are there behaviors of concern, identifying them, listening to where those behaviors of concern are being talked about and shared, looking specifically at those individuals and who the targets are and what the comments would be. That's where workplace violence is being dealt with. We can talk about diamond formations with first responders entering the building so the guns are pointed in all the right directions. But at that moment, it's too late. The guns are already in the workplace. The actions have already taken place. I listened to a gentleman last week at the International Crisis and Risk Communications Conference. And by the way, if you have an interest to learn more about those types of things, that's a great conference to go to. But his wife was the librarian at Sandy Hook. And as she heard what was going on, she took the children in the library and moved them into a storage room and barricaded the door. That's not the point of where you need to be thinking. She did a phenomenal job and made a great difference and saved those young people's lives. But getting the information and having an intervention before it rises to the point that that gun has come into the workplace, that's workplace prevention, workplace violence prevention, and to think about it. So do you want to know what will happen tomorrow? I think we all do. I think that's a natural human instinct. I mean, we watch the news, we listen to information that's out there, and we make decisions. We all hope that we're going to know that that big client is going to sign the contract tomorrow and not go to someplace else. But if we could know today what will happen tomorrow, it would make a difference in the decisions that we make in our companies. And creating an intelligence network empowers you to know that. The question I would ask you is, can you afford not to know? Can you afford not to understand what's going on within your very organization? That's an issue that none of us can fall into as we come together. If you'd like to learn more about how all those things work or how to align your plans to best practices, give us a call. We'd be glad to help. You need to learn about how you would create your own intelligence network or even to schedule some training to support within it. This webinar series is being underwritten by RBA, the Rochester Business Alliance, or the Eastern Great Lakes Association of Contingency Planners. And if you want an assessment of your business continuity plans or workplace violence plans or your social media monitoring plans or any of the areas, reach out and give us a call. That assessment is available to you at no cost. It's a $2,500 assessment, and it is underwritten by the two organizations that you see on the screen. So there's a lot to think about when we think about workplace violence, and these types of things that sometimes appear to be random are not. They're targeted. And that information is available to you that you could have within your organization to make a difference today. So Chip, you did a great job at the beginning talking about this. Any observations that you want to share as we try to wrap up today?
Sure, Jim, thanks. The thing I'm struck by, and we've seen it with the previous programs that you've done, is how the playing field has changed. pre-social media, I know because I was there in the workplace. You'd have he said, she said, rumor mills. Oftentimes, people not wanting to be pinned down to what they thought was going on, and many times difficult for HR or management to really say, well, this is what's happening, because they didn't really know, and to kind of let it slide. And it's very clear from what you've shown today that with social media, we now have the evidence. It's clear. It's there. It's in writing. You know where it's coming from. And it strikes me that it's irresponsible not to be managing social media, not to know what's going on around your company, and being able to anticipate things and get in and deal with it early on. So I think the world of computers and social media has certainly changed our lives, but it's given us the stuff that we need to be able to take action early on, rather than just saying, I wonder if this is real.
Great observations, and you're right. I think about all the things that I've done in my life, and certainly as I was growing up, I'm kind of glad some of that didn't make it out into the world to be shared as you're going. When we look at this, these types of things that are going on social media are data. It's information. It's intelligence. And when we talk about data and a lot of these things, sometimes data is soft and sometimes it's hard. Soft data would be looking at a behavior of concern and saying, oh, I think that's a problem. Hard data is looking at a picture or a word, and today it's not just the words, it's the pictures. The example back with the people leaning out the pickup window smoking the blunt. Those types of documentation lead you to information that you can't ignore. We've seen a story that's been quite large this week out of Oklahoma, where the SAE fraternity was singing songs that had certainly racial inclinations associated with it. And that's changed the lives of that fraternity, those employees, that university that were there, the students that were involved, expelling people and carrying that forward. Years ago, that would never have been seen. There would be rumors about it occurring on a bus with singing a song, but no one would have documented proof. Today, that information is there. There's an expectation that you're providing a workplace that's free of violence, that's not hostile, that there is no negative intent associated with it. The expectation is you know what's going on within your organization. Fortunately, you can now, and it can be done very economically and very reasonably. So I'd like to have you think about what we've talked about today, and let's see about what the applications could well mean. And if you have stories that you want to share with us, please reach back out and do that as we look and try to compile this information to share with others. If you've got questions about today's webinar, contact us at firestorm.com. You can go there and fill out a contact form, or you can drop us an email at webinars@firestorm.com, or pick up the phone and call at 800-321-2219. We live in a world that's changing radically from the world that we all grew up in. Just because you're not spending your life on social media doesn't mean that those in your workplace aren't sharing information that, if you knew about, could make a difference in their lives and the lives of others. If you want to know what's happening, you have to listen and look. That's the key here to creating predictive, actionable intelligence. Thanks for your time today. We'll share some more thoughts with you next month. By the way, there's a webinar coming up next month that's a general session related to cyber breach. And if that's a topic that you've got an interest in, if you look on our website, you can learn more about that. Talk to everyone later. Chip, thanks again. Hope you have a good week, and we'll talk to you next month.
Thanks, Jim. Safe day, everyone.
Goodbye.